Welcome to the Spawn Chunks, episode number 23 for Monday, January 21st, 2019. My name is Johnny, but you might know me as Pixel Riffs, and joining me, as always, is Joel Duggan. Hi Joel, how are you?
I am doing fantastic, my friend. It is one of those Mondays where I just feel super productive. And even though I overslept, I like on Mondays that I have a very set regimen of things to do. I'm not stuck making big decisions about like what should I do today. It's like Spawn Chunks and then some YouTube stuff, and then there's some social media things. Like it all just kind of like steamrolls after we launch the Spawn Chunks in the morning. Like that's kind of like the little snowball that kind of pushes off the mountain in the morning, and then it just kind of goes from there.
Starting your day with a coffee, some breakfast, and the Spawn Chunks.
Yep.
Good times. So how have you been getting on in Minecraft this week? Have you been up to much?
So I had big plans to do more streaming and more playing, and I did get a small session in yesterday, and it was a lot of fun. More stuff on the path, which I was asking people in my chat, because I was a little bit concerned, because not only is this now like the second stream in a row where I've been building a path going through the South Meadows, but it's also a video where I was redoing a path that I did last week.
You're like, this path again, why?
Yeah, so I put in some extra playtime the week before, and just because I wanted to play without any kind of like, I just wanted to play and not worry about stuff like streaming or videos or whatever, and really think and get some stuff done. And what I did was I went and made a much more interesting path beyond the one that I did on stream. And when I did that, I went back to look at the one that I did on stream. I was like, wow, this is really straight and boring, even though I thought it was kind of curvy and cool. So I just thought, okay, let's just spice this up. Let's take this in a couple different directions. And so that's what I did on stream. Had a lot of help from Alistair. And I have to say that big projects like this, when you've got some grind work to do, my gosh, does it go fast when you've got two people.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Like, I did all the planning with just path block, but we've already done a lot of path block stuff in the meadows, and I didn't want to continue that. I wanted to switch to like a dirt path, but textured up with like gravel and dirt and stuff like that. But to get things in the base, it was all just coarse dirt. So I laid it out and kind of drew it with path block, and then replaced it all with coarse dirt. And Alistair helped me out with that. And man, the whole thing, I fixed the path, I redid it, I made it look good, and took the whole thing from start to finish and turned it into coarse dirt. And I couldn't be happier with it right now. We also took the time to, with the help of my Twitch chat, and I got to give a shout out to Paranor here because he had a fantastic idea. I was trying to come up with like a brown block palette. And I knew that I wanted to do coarse dirt as the main, maybe throw in some concrete powder, like brown concrete powder. And I was toying around with like spruce wood and stripped spruce wood, and everything was too red. Like the brown, the coarse dirt and the brown concrete powder, they're warm, but they're not like a red warm.
Yeah.
And so when you started putting in the spruce wood, the new spruce wood, because I'm basing everything off of like the beta textures, it doesn't match. It's not the same color balance. And so I was looking for a lighter block, and Paranor's like, well, what about brown mushroom? And I thought, oh, hey, yeah. I haven't looked at that in a long time. I use it at the bottom of riverbeds because it looks like silt. Like it looks like a nice silt color.
Yeah.
Goes good as kind of like a color shift from the clay block. And of course the brown mushroom block has been retextured with 3.3, the beta textures. And so I tossed that in there, and it's a perfect color temperature for the highlight block. It's not going to be everywhere, which is good because it's not an easy block to get.
Yeah.
But so I'm using that, and I decided to try stripped spruce, and that actually works. It's one of the few places that I've been able to use the default greenish stripped spruce look.
Yeah.
And it just sort of works. Podzol was too contrasty, like it just stood out too much.
Yeah, too much texture in that one a little bit, I think.
Yeah. So the stripped spruce logs, which are good because they're directional. So if you want to change it, if you have two of them next to one another, you can actually just change the directions of the texture, and it works out much better. So I haven't actually tried the end. I don't know what the end cap would look like. I didn't try that. I was looking mostly at the strip side. But so I've got that texture thing all done. So I probably won't do that on like as part of a YouTube episode or something like that. Like that's something I do on stream and then edit out, because texturing that whole thing that's like a couple hours of I mean, it's a couple hundred blocks easily.
Yeah.
So going over that and texturing that, it's going to be fun. It's going to look great in the end. But I'm just happy to have a plan. Like I'm no longer logging in, and like it's nice to not be constantly think about like where a block is being placed and how to make a curve or make a staircase or what direction and how you're revealing the view. It's once you get to the texturing part, it's just like, all right, I don't have to think about anything. I just have to just make sure I'm not placing two blocks next to each other that are the same, and then just go. And it should be good. But I have a question out of that because I remember one of the things that I remember about learning like textures and stuff was watching you do a jungle path, I think in DB season 4.
Yeah.
So when you're texturing stuff and you've got like your inventory is full of stuff to use for the texture blocks, do you have any tips for having that go quickly? Like how do you go about texturing a path when the path's already drawn, it's already there, you just have, and you've got your block selected? Like what's the process?
I think, generally speaking, I'll go through and take out a bunch of blocks first before I go back through and put them all back in, because switching between the shovel and the blocks is what's going to take the most amount of time. If you're taking out two blocks and then you switch to the blocks to fill them back in, I feel like that's a slower process than just going through and taking out, okay, I need this one to go there, that one to go there, that one to go there, and you just dig all of the holes before you place the blocks back in. I feel like it goes faster that way.
Good call. Because what I end up doing, and I was doing a little bit of this yesterday on stream, is not even using the shovel, just using the block to punch the block out and then replace it. So having like two different kinds of blocks in your hands and then just punching stuff out and then just left or right clicking depending on which block you want to place. But it takes a long time, of course, because that's much slower than using a shovel to dig stuff out.
Yeah.
So dig out all the holes first, or at least in a section. That's okay.
Yeah. The other tip I have when it comes to texturing stuff like that is to avoid checkerboarding. Ironically, think about how a knight moves in chess, because knights always move, they move one space forward and one space diagonally is always how they move. And so if you treat the block you're starting on as where the knight starts, you can add a texture to that block, the block in front of it, and a block diagonally from there. And that means you get this kind of two and then a block at a diagonal pattern that avoids kind of the checkerboarding thing quite nicely. And I use that pattern all the time, but you can't notice it so much in the materials because it's kind of, it camouflages it more than just having like alternating blocks of different kinds to make it look a little bit less like a chessboard.
Yeah, no, it's something that I did with the Inn on a Bridge. I was using that pattern with smooth stone and stone bricks, and the smooth stone was meant to be like wagon tracks, like being worn down. Yeah. And so every 2 blocks, like the rule was no more than 2 blocks together, you know, and then I would have to switch at a diagonal and then switch back. So it loosely gave the idea of like a rough wagony track, stuff like that. So yeah, cool. No, I'll take that into account. These are all really good, questions for big builds, and those are the kind of questions that you might want to ask us for next week, because we are coming up on our first roundtable. Yes, it's going to be episode 24.
Very excited for this.
Yes, me too. I've been chatting with our guests a little bit off podcast, and you of course know him. fWhip is going to be our guest next week, and so we're really looking forward to talking with him. He suggested one of his topics would be bringing builds to life with little details. So that's something that he wants to talk about. I think that Johnny and I will probably have some, large world or big world questions about like big survival builds, things like that, things that kind of cater to fWhip's experience. But if you have questions for fWhip that you'd like us to try to fit into the roundtable, then send us an email at thespawnchunks@gmail.com by Friday, January 25th. Why so early? Well, because of time zones and work schedules, we're going to be talking to fWhip on the weekend, not on Monday. So we need some time to get those emails in, read over them, choose the ones we want to use on the show, and also give fWhip a heads up as to which emails are in the show notes. So if you got questions for fWhip, let us know. We're excited to do this roundtable thing. It is our first one, so I mean it's going to be a little bit of shooting from the hip. We've got a plan, but it might be a little bit different than the show that you're used to. But we've had 20 or so episodes to hone the main Spawn Chunks podcast.
It's like a well-oiled machine at this point.
Yeah, into what it's become. And it's the great thing about podcasting, as with Minecraft, you kind of like start somewhere, and as you kind of find out what you like, find out what fits the groove, you kind of lean into that. So this being our first roundtable, it'll probably take 3 or 4 of those each, between now and say April or May, before we really get a good groove for how they're going to go.
Yeah, but if
but
in
I'm
the
excited
meantime,
about it.
Yeah, absolutely. In the meantime, if folks at home haven't heard of fWhip, then you've been under a rock this entire time, I imagine, because he's a fantastic builder. He's got a series called Building with fWhip. He's also on the Decidedly Vanilla server, which I frequent, and he's got a great channel. His channel is growing really fast right now. He had a video about castle design recently that has kind of blown up, and he is definitely one to follow if you're into terraforming, into building big, landscaping, and just the general kind of survival world gameplay kind of stuff, but taking it to the next level, taking it to, making a cohesive picture of like a village with landscape in the background and stuff like that. He's definitely been brought up on this show a number of times in the past, so very excited to have him on the show and talk about his Minecraft philosophy.
Yeah, absolutely. And we've also had some people suggest guests for future roundtables. So if you don't have a question for fWhip, but you have an idea for someone that you'd like to see on the roundtable, I'm hoping we already have our guest for February, but we can look ahead to March and April and just kind of think about the different kinds of guests. We want to kind of keep it, switching back and forth, and see what we can come up with there. But yeah, I think that's about it for me. What have you been doing in Minecraft this week?
Well, inspired in part by your discussions last week about building this path and how people tend to kind of populate a path with builds once it's in place, I actually started planning out a town in the survival guide world this week. And I kind of wish that I'd called back to the podcast and directed people to it, because a few more people might show up as a result. But I was kind of thinking about what you were saying, and I brought up a similar point in the video of saying, once you've got the paths in place, then the buildings sort of almost take care of themselves in a way. Like it becomes more obvious what you want to do with a certain space because it's a specific size, or you've got a certain shape that you think, oh, this would fit really nicely here. So I've planned out, I got the bird's eye view kind of cinematic camera account facing down towards this giant plains that I'm building this city in, and the episode was all about planning out a town. And I just got a diamond shovel, made path blocks the entire time, and built these kind of winding pathways around this central ravine that I've got in the town. It's probably going to be the biggest project I've actually done, because a lot of the time when I build large stuff, it tends to be either quite isolated, like the Jungle Temple in DV Season 4, which was very much just plonked down in the center of the jungle without much of a cohesive city around it. And then the other stuff I built, I've started cities, but I guess I burn out on various things. I get distracted by other projects. So this is going to be an ongoing city project, and it's probably the most organized I've ever been about a town. I think putting the paths in was a really good start. It's given me an idea of the shape of the area a lot more than it otherwise would. So thank you for the inspiration for that, Joel, because that's...
Hey, no problem. I've watched those videos too, by the way, and I love the feeling of scale that you get immediately when you look at paths over a large area, like because you did a lot. When I saw the thumbnail, I was like, oh wow, that's a pretty big area. But then of course you did a lot more than that in the video. Yeah. And when the final shot from the air in the video, I was like, oh wow, okay, this is gonna be big, in a good way. Like I'm not saying that not suggesting anything other than this is just gonna be a lot of really great content. But what I like about the path is that Minecraft blocks are a meter by a meter in the game. It's very hard to wrap your head around that. That's a big chunk of anything. Yeah. Like that's not a small thing. I'm only 2 meters tall, right? So like that's half my height. Like these are not things that you could pick up, right? Like that's, I think, the thing. But when you put down, a path that's 2 or 3 meters wide, people can just kind of like mesh, because they know how wide a sidewalk is in real life. They know how big a road is in real life for the most part. The average 2-lane, city street. Yeah. And so that immediately brings you a sense of scale. Yeah, right? It
gives you like a perspective on things, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And so that's what I like about building the roads first. Now, I've got a question. Did you build the roads just out of pure, like, I want to have a section of housing here, so I'm going to build a road around it? Or were the roads built where you found that you were constantly running when you were moving around that area?
It's not so much that I was running, more like the terrain lent itself to certain patterns, because there's a lot of kind of slow, shallow, curved hills around that area. It's a plains biome, so it's quite sort of natural ups and downs that led to certain paths going certain ways. There were certain landmarks on that plains biome, the ravine. There was a kind of like cave system that breaches the surface quite close by at the northern part of the map that I kind of wanted to connect up with the path. And then the swamp on the top right, as we're looking at it from this, top down view.
Yeah,
and so,
from your video, yeah.
So yeah, it was more like the paths that I would take to get to those specific areas. So yeah, maybe like if I was sprinting towards it in a direction, this is the route I would take, I imagine. But I was doing that maybe more subconsciously. What I was trying to do was work with the terrain, follow the natural curves of the environment, and then build walls to kind of turn the hills into like retaining walls where the grass comes all the way up to the the front there. But yeah, it's a bit of both, I suppose. I was also planning out like this is a section where smaller and run down houses are going to be, where it kind of leads out into the swamp. So I'm making the paths between them a little bit more winding and a little bit like enclosing these smaller areas where I'm just going to build little shacks and stuff like that.
Nice. Very cool. Not necessarily roads that you would walk down, but roads that you would be able to look down peripherally and just
like
oh, there's an alley and
alleyways and stuff like that. Yeah, absolutely.
Cool.
Yeah. And one of the things I've been kind of holding back on with this town though are I can imagine a lot of the new blocks from 1.14 fitting in really well here. And this is something I really wanted to bring up on the show before we get too much further, because you mentioned this a little bit when we were chatting before the show started about holding off on certain projects because something is coming and you're like, oh, that would be perfect there. Like I'm making this city a kind of medieval but industrial kind of theme. So these people are mining out this ravine for whatever material it's got in it. And there's a lot of the kind of more sooty palette of blocks. So I'm using kind of black and grey wool, and I'm using a lot of different stone types and the cyan terracotta and stuff like that. And I think the industrial looking, like the blast furnaces and the barrels and like all of those blocks that are coming in 1.14 are going to look really great in this town. So I'm almost holding off on building too much there until I've got access to those blocks. Have you found yourself doing the same thing?
Yes. I would love to build a castle. I've been seeing a lot of concept art in my adventures and my kind of chill time after I'm done work, and a lot of castles. And I just think, man, that'd be fun to build in Minecraft. And man, that'd be fun to build in Minecraft. And I think, and it would be fun to have slabs and stairs and walls in andesite, granite, diorite, stone. I even did a little, connecting thing. I was kind of polishing up all the sort of unfinished connections in the South Meadows the other day, and we added a dirt slab to the server. It's a data pack that allows you to craft the petrified oak slab, which is in the game, but you can't craft it in survival. So I added a recipe for that and then retextured it to be coarse dirt. So we have a dirt slab. So when you have like a rough path, you can have some stairs and not have to jump up and down, which brings me to something else I want to talk to you about paths. But the bridge that connects to one of the villages it wasn't ugly. It was just unfinished. It was one of these things where it was very kind of like plunked on the side of something. So I made this overhang of this cliff that was kind of like, looks like it was like carved out to allow people to walk by it. And the whole time I was building it, I was like, man, I wish I had slabs. Like I wish I had stone slabs, and I wish I had andesite slabs, because this would look so much better than what I'm doing. And I'm in a lot of ways, even with other blocks, like the new crafting blocks, because I've got some industrial ideas, but like the bottom of, I think it's a smithing table, is just such a cool ceiling for industrial places. And even the top of it, like, so all of that kind of stuff, I'm just holding off. It's like, well, why am I going to start any big new building projects that don't fit the current style of the Meadows? Because anything that I've got current style, I've probably got the block palette to do it. Yeah. But I'm starting to feel the what's the word I'm looking for? The restraint, the block shyness of the upcoming Snapshot. I'm not sure what you want to call that.
That just burnout. I'm not burned out. That you're holding back because you think something is coming that I can really leverage in whatever it is you're trying to build next.
Well, as much as I just did this path twice, I hate building things twice. I don't want to build something that I'm really happy with and then have 1.14 drop and go, ah, this would have looked so much better if it was granite, and
Yeah.
then just like I have to redo it. It's like, nope, I have no desire
Yeah.
to get into that noise. So yeah, I feel your pain on that. It's hard at the moment to tackle anything larger that isn't just technical, where like it doesn't really matter, what it's going to be. Although I have to say, like, even I imagine technical players are also champing at the bit for some of the new things coming out.
Yeah, and speaking of that, shall we get to this week's news? Because there have been snapshots, and they've got some really interesting new stuff in them.
Absolutely. So this past week was Snapshot 13W03A, B, and C. For the lack of details, B and C were mostly just bug fixes, changes to A that came out. But we got a new block, which we had no idea was coming.
Again, another surprise block.
Another surprise block. And it is the compost block, or the composter block. And there's new sounds that have been added to the game. There are barrel sounds, grindstone, sweet berry bush sounds, placement for and breaking sounds for crops and netherwort, as well as sounds for blast furnace and smokers. Changing the campfire model and texture that we saw Japa tweet out last Friday, I think. Mm-hmm. And they also changed the campfire light level, which they didn't advertise, which I was surprised about.
Yeah, we're going to get to a bit of discussion about those in a minute, because I have a lot to say specifically about the composter, and I imagine you do as well. But one thing I wanted to touch on before that is that the final update has been released for the Nintendo 3DS version of Minecraft. Now, we saw them kind of sunsetting the other legacy console versions, getting their final update for Xbox 360, PS3, that kind of stuff, where the technology just isn't able to keep up with the amount of new updates they want to release. And with so many of the newer platforms being on Bedrock, it kind of doesn't make sense for them to keep developing for older consoles that are going to have fewer and fewer players. So basically, the Nintendo 3DS version has now caught up to some features from 1.12 and even earlier. It's now got woodland mansions, concrete, the mending enchantment, llamas, stuff like that. There is a changelog on the Minecraft.net website, which has all of the newest features coming to the 3DS. I don't think anybody in our community specifically has mentioned that they play on 3DS and not any other platform. So it'd be interesting to hear if anybody has found this podcast and is interested in 3DS news, but I figured it was worth touching on. And I expect, in a community this large, people might still be playing with the 3DS as their handheld of choice, either because they don't have the money to buy a newer console or because, for whatever reason, they really love the 3DS. But I think with the Switch kind of taking over the Nintendo's kind of favorite handheld position, it makes sense that we're seeing the end of the 3DS version at that point. So I hope for folks who are listening who have been playing on 3DS, it's had a good run for you and you're looking forward to other updates on other platforms.
Yeah, the only thing that I can take away from this, having very little experience with Bedrock and other versions of the game, specifically because, I'm so new to Minecraft in the grand scheme of things, it does have this weird foreshadowing of Doom for stuff like the Java edition. Like I hope it doesn't go this way. I'd like them to support both for the length of Minecraft, but whether, depending on how things go, if there's ever a Minecraft 2 or as, the technology, I think about this in similar to like Flash. Like Flash used to be how you made websites 10 years ago. Mm-hmm. And it just became inefficient and too resource heavy, and a lot of developers, specifically I want to say Apple, just said nope, forget it, we're not supporting it anymore. It's just it's not the user experience that we want to have moving forward, and so it just falls away. Like it stops. And I saw it trickle through all kinds of industry, like Flash animation, which I used to do for Canadian television, is not really a thing anymore. There's Toon Boom and other technologies that are better suited for that kind of thing that have now taken off and replaced, which is now called Adobe Animate, as the main way to make cartoons. And again, a lot of it is just because a better tool or a more efficient user experience has been developed. So it does kind of make me a little bit concerned, because when I was looking at the conversations in our Discord about Bedrock and about the differences and things that are happening with some of our more technical and some of our Bedrock, players, I just thought, like, man, I don't want to play on Bedrock. And I don't want to sound like an old man saying get off my lawn, but I like Java, and there's a lot of things in Java that I prefer. to even just hearing how things are different in Bedrock. And I don't ever want to be forced into like, well, Java's no longer supported because, well, it's resource heavy, which I think it is. And like, there's a lot of different things about Java that I know are inefficient. And I'm kind of like, I'm hoping that this isn't foreshadowing for, you know, the end of one of the versions. And I doubt it would be Bedrock. Like if you put them up against one another and Mojang had to choose, I'm betting it would be Bedrock.
Yeah, this kind of discussion always tends to come up whenever a version of Minecraft goes away or whenever, you know, some kind of update comes out. Like it started happening especially when features would end up getting released on Bedrock instead of on Java, and then they would come to Java later, but people would say, hey, wait, why has Bedrock got that first? And we know a little bit more about that now and how they tend to develop features kind of being split between the two development teams for each platform. But they have said in the past that they aren't planning to discontinue Java Edition ever. And Java as a language is still developing. Like there was a new update to Java not too long ago, and like it's one of those things where the platform itself is still moving forward, and it's always going to be useful for certain things. They plan to continue Minecraft for as long as possible, and when, if ever, the Java edition finally goes away, it will be because the Bedrock edition is superior objectively, as far as I'm concerned. And I don't think that's happening in anybody's eyes just yet. Not going to guarantee that it'll be around forever, but I honestly don't think they're planning on getting rid of Java, for want of a better term. Like I don't think they're ever planning to do that at this stage.
Is Bedrock, it was the development of Bedrock, like the Windows 10 Bedrock edition, was that purely for consoles? Like, is that why that even exists? Was because Java can't run on consoles? I
think so, yeah. And I think it was coded for consoles kind of differently in the first place, just because, Java won't run on consoles. But then I think the reason for it to come to Windows 10 was the kind of the Microsoft approach to things. The kind of, you want to be able to play anywhere and you want cross-platform compatibility. So you want somebody on Windows to be able to play the same stuff that they could on the Xbox. And then it's just a matter of, do you want it in your living room or do you want it at a desk? And I think that's probably why Bedrock has had the emphasis for a little while. It's just been, the more accessible version, the version that you can get on consoles and then play with people on a Switch or on the PC, that kind of thing.
So what do you think about the new Composter?
I like the Composter. I'm somebody who composts stuff at home anyway. So, and by the way, you're going to hear a lot of difference between the way Joel says compost and the way I say compost. And I'm sure the way everybody online has been saying compost now that they have a reason to bring it up.
It's very funny to me. And I knew the difference with myself, with, North American accents and British and some European accents. I got that. What I was not expecting was the difference across North America. Yeah. People are putting an emphasis on the wrong syllable in some places, and I find it very funny. So sometimes it's a composter, sometimes it's a composter, sometimes it's a composter, and you're like, what? Yeah, it's so funny. But yeah, I do as well. There's a citywide program actually, and so a lot of people around here compost. It has reduced my garbage output like tenfold.
Oh yeah. It's great, and now it's going to reduce your Iron Farm poppy output as well, because you can just have all of the organic stuff just filtering into composters. I think it's going to be interesting seeing this implemented in people's worlds and where it's going to be implemented, because it doesn't seem quite as efficient as it at first sounds. You think, oh great, I can convert all of this organic stuff that I have left over into bone meal, but having done a little bit of experimentation with this, the items that you can compost have like a quality associated with them. Like items can fail to compost. So it normally takes, if you're filling it up, say, with carrots or potatoes or something that is like a pure vegetable, it takes between 7 and 12 vegetables roughly to fill the composter up. Like 7 is the minimum, and then that gives you 1 bone meal. So you're talking 7 items for 1 item back. And as far as bone meal goes, everyone's going, well, I get 3 bone meal just from killing 1 skeleton, and that's if I get 1 bone to drop. I already have a skeleton spawner. Why do we need this? But we will get to that. The other items like seeds and flowers sometimes take more. Like when it comes to melon slices, I was watching a video by Ilmango, because of course I was. Anytime any new mechanic gets added to the game, Ilmango is on it. Melons take like about 35 melon slices to fill up a composter. So he was working on an automatic sort of passive bone meal farm that produced about 8,800 bone meal per hour. it required a huge melon farm. I'm talking like like 128 block fields of melons in order to make about 8,000 bone meal, which you could probably get from a skeleton spawner in about an hour with one or maybe two skeleton spawners running in tandem. So it almost seems unnecessary, but then you think those skeleton spawners would probably require some kind of player input and looting if you wanted to get more bones. So just having that run in the background is a possibility, and it's good to know that that is kind of possible. Interestingly enough, cake is the only thing that always composts successfully. So if you want to compost a cake, if you have just tons of cake lying around, then like get cake and feed that into your composter, because that will get you a lot of compost very fast.
Something that I find very interesting is that it is a percentage chance that these items will create a layer of compost in the block, not a guarantee. So there's 10, 20, 50, 80, and 100, cake and pumpkin pie being the ones that you just mentioned. Mm-hmm. And out of all of them, nothing above 50 is a natural occurring thing outside of mushroom blocks. But again, those aren't, you can't farm them automatically.
Yeah.
So cake and pumpkin pie, you have to craft. Hay bale, cookie, bread, baked potato, you have to baked potato. Sorry, lie. Baked potato is something you could automate. But that's the only thing in the 80% that could be villager farmed, sent to a smelter, sent out as a baked potato, and then put into compost, which is, I mean, cool. A lot of work for bone meal.
And you've also got to fuel the smelter, and there's like a whole lot of other steps that have to go into that before you're getting a reasonable amount of bone meal.
Yeah. There's also other things like, say, in the 50% range, there are a lot of things that are a lot easier, I think, to farm than, say, pumpkins and melons. Like you've got wheat, and you've got carrots, and you've got beetroot. So finally a use for beetroot, because there's nothing else you can do with it.
Yes. And finally a use for all those wheat seeds that we've all been gathering since we built a large enough wheat farm.
And that's the thing. So with a wheat farm, you wouldn't have to filter out the wheat and the wheat seeds if that wheat farm is using, compost, because wheat and seeds could just go straight in. Like you you funnel them all into the same system. So that increases your 50% chance up to possibly, 60%, I guess. I don't know what the math would be on that, but more chances than not. A lot of the stuff, yes, it doesn't yield a lot of bone meal, but these are the kind of things that you'd want to set it and forget it.
Yeah.
I don't see it here on the wiki, but I'm pretty sure I saw that poppies were something, like all the flowers were things that you could use into compost, but they're down in that 10% range of stuff that's just
90% of the time it's not going to fill it up any further.
Yeah, but that's the thing. Like I've got 2 double chests full of poppies from our iron farm, and they've been full for months.
Yeah.
So the extra poppies are being shot into a cactus underneath the iron farm. So in early game, like if you've built an iron farm and you don't have a mob farm, or you are playing on passive, then having enough bone meal to make like a lot of bone blocks, like you could, without having to really monitor it, you could have an iron farm in your spawn chunks just constantly pumping out poppies and iron, and have enough stuff to really create, when it comes time to make that wheat field, you're going to be able to use bone meal. You're going to have some, at the very least.
Yeah.
And for now, I guess this all changes. in 1.14. Is bone meal still used to make dye?
Yeah. I mean, you in 1.14 you craft it into dye. I think you put it in your crafting interface and it turns into white dye. So that is going to be an extra step that requires player input.
Right, but then you still have white dye for white concrete, white glass, and those kind of things, terracotta. So so that helps. Like, so there's more uses for bone meal than just harvesting crops and things like that.
Absolutely, and there are more uses of the composter than that as well, because a few people in the Redstone community have been looking into this, and it's one of the only blocks in Java Edition as of right now that can have stuff input into it via hoppers, can output a variable comparator signal, by which we mean the different stages of fullness of the composter, like give off a different redstone signal when a comparator is measuring its fullness. And it's the only one that can have that and also be moved by a piston. So like if you imagine like you're measuring a chest with a comparator, great, but in Java edition at least, it can't be moved by a piston. I think they have that in Bedrock and maybe have for a while, and it's supposed to be coming to Java at some point, but it might be kind of difficult to code, or they might be keeping it out of the sake of A, tradition, and B, it's, you know, an enforced restriction on what you can do with those things. When it comes to composters, if you've got things filling up at a certain level and a piston pushing them over, and then that changes a comparator signal somewhere, you can really integrate that into Redstone contraptions quite well. The previous thing I've seen people do this with is cauldrons. You have a comparator output measuring a cauldron, and that can be pushed and pulled in front of a comparator, but that only has 4 different states, whether it's got like, you know, a full cauldron, one that's you've had 1 water bottle taken out of it, you've had 2 water bottles taken out of it, and then it's empty, compared to a composter's 8 for a start. And cauldrons can't be filled or emptied using hoppers because you can't collect or, you know, put in water that way. Yeah. So composters suddenly have this interesting Redstone functionality, Redstone interaction that nobody really expected them to have. So it's been really interesting seeing people put that to use.
Yeah, I watched a couple of Hermitcraft related videos, both Mumbo and Cubfan. I mean, when you get into Redstone and stuff like that, you kind of go to the people that you watch that are your technical go-tos. And Cubfan had some really cool ideas with, you know, moving the composter, taking signals off of it, but then you can empty it automatically if you move it over a hopper. It just it just gets completely emptied in one go, and then that resets. So if you have like a game where, you know, you're shooting an arrow at a target, and if you get to 7, then you win, and the counter resets, then this will actually do it. Like it'll count up to 7 or 8, depending on how you do your redstone, and then when it gets to the end, then you just have that redstone signal push that piston. It empties the composter, and then it resets it. The only thing you need is like a double chest of stuff above it to then refill it, you know, one at a time as it moves along. I thought it was really, really cool. I love the fact that so many of these new blocks have different comparator outputs. Like you've got the lectern has got, you know, a signal. You've got the composter now. I'm trying to think about. I don't think the new crafting blocks like the cartography table and things like that, they seem to be more of a crafting interface.
Yeah, stuff like
a storage thing.
One of my first questions about the loom when they introduced it, because we didn't know about all of these other things yet, I was like, does the loom have any kind of redstone output? Like if you put a banner in there, but the loom doesn't like let you leave anything in its interface. But I imagine blast furnaces and barrels and stuff like that will act much the same as current furnaces and chests do, where you can just measure the amount of items that are in there at any time. But having stuff that's got more of an interesting functionality in and more of an interesting kind of use in Redstone stuff is going to be it's going to be a lot of fun.
It's also very cool looking. I like the texture. It's very similar to wood planks, but there's 4 instead of 3. And I want to say, I haven't looked at it next to a bunch of stuff, but I want to say it's closer to a spruce texture in terms of color. Yeah,
I've seen people use it for beehives in trees already. Just kind of putting it up into one of the large kind of oak trees. And I think they even had like, they'd use the debug stick or something like that, or maybe attach them to invisible blocks, but they added buttons around, just kind of attached to whatever invisible blocks were there, or kind of manipulated to be hanging in the air as if invisible, to look like bees kind of swarming out of it. And I thought that was a fantastic idea. Not accomplishable in survival, sadly, but very cool nonetheless.
Yeah, no, I like the look of it. I like that the new campfire also has a full light level, which just makes more sense.
They
didn't even mention this in the notes, so I feel like the campfire having a light level of 9 was maybe a bug.
It may have been,
and they just fixed it.
They didn't want to like draw too much attention to that one, I guess. But it does
really
sense. It makes total sense. Like we were saying last time, it doesn't make sense that a campfire doesn't output as much light as a torch does. And I appreciate like the ambience of it could be a factor, but when you're out there in the dark and you want to use the campfire to ward off mobs in the first place, then it kind of makes more sense for it to be functionally able to do that.
Sure. I think too that I did pay attention to the sound updates. I don't have a big opinion on them. I think they're all good, with the exception of the sweet berry bush. It's weird. It's very crunchy.
You kind of place them down and it makes a kind of noise. And it feels a little strange. Less like you're planting stuff. Like I imagine they probably just didn't want to use the same block breaking sound that they use for like when you pick up crops. It makes the sound of like a dirt block breaking. And they were kind of like, well, there's an opportunity to add something new in here because these are new features. Yeah, I don't know. It just feels almost a little bit tinny to me. I feel like it doesn't have like a deep enough, like I'm putting roots into the ground with this kind of noise.
Yeah, I agree. I think the crop noise would be like the new crop noise, which is fine. Like it's different than it is before, but it's not something that makes or breaks the experience. But I think using that for the bushes would be better. Moving on into chunk mail, we have a message from Dan, aka Gearhead4077, and he says, "Hello, I was listening to your latest episode 22, where you were talking about the redstone capabilities of the new lectern. I'm very excited to see new creations that people can make with it. My first thought was to use the lectern in a train station." That was my first thought too, Dan. Great minds think alike. Turn the book to page 3 and some redstone magic happens, quote unquote, and you can get a rail car heading straight to station 3. I would love to see something like that, but I don't have the redstone knowledge to do it myself. Love the show and keep it up. Well, I've already mentioned Cubfan earlier in a little bit of a lectern comment, but there's I'll have a link in the show notes to some of the first look that Cubfan had at the lectern, and he had a line of like 15 redstone lamps lined up just to kind of demonstrate how quickly you can turn the page in the book and move that redstone signal from 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 all the way up to full. I love that it does the full change. And I think what I like so much about the lectern in terms of its page number to redstone output is that you can, if you want, have it be even. The challenge that I find with comparators is that they are using a percentage of fullness to create a redstone output of 1 to 15. So a hopper only has 5 slots. A chest has got 21, I think. No, 27. So
27, yeah.
So the number of items that you put in a hopper is different for the number of items that you put in a chest if you want a signal of 5 to come out of both of them.
Yeah.
With a book, however, you can just make a 15-page book, and then it's just as simple as page 1 through 15, so 4 signal strength 1 through 15. I think that's brilliant. Now, if your book is only 3 pages long, well, that's going to be a little bit different. But it gives the ability for the player to reduce the complexity of the redstone controls to something that is very, very accessible. And I love the idea of having one lectern that allows you to choose a train station, a track that's going to switch. So I think you guys had something very similar on DV Season 4, but it wasn't a lectern. What were you guys using for control? Do you remember?
It was just a series of buttons attached to pillars that were all signposted, and so I mean, KB built the entire thing, so I have no idea how it worked, but you essentially just enabled whichever track you wanted to go to, and then you got in the minecart. Once you went over a certain part of the minecart track, the whole system reset itself, or you could hit a reset button if you put in the wrong one. So with a lectern, I can imagine that being much simpler in terms of the interface. You don't have to walk all the way down a platform to find out where you want to go. You can just flip through the book and go, okay, iron farm, and then you just go straight there. That's fantastic. I like the idea that you can make that effectively like a text interface with a redstone thing without it having to be overcomplicated in like a series of buttons with signs over them or item frames or anything like that.
Oh man, yeah. The first line on your book page could be iron farm, and then the paragraph underneath that with the new editing capabilities of text in Minecraft could be a description of the iron farm and what else might also be there. So if you can flip through the book real quick and just be like, iron farm, sheep farm, mesa, and just kind of, if you know what you're looking for, then you don't have to worry about it. But if you're not sure, you could slowly go through and be like, is the mesas where the bone farm is? I can't remember. And so all the things that we have signs up that ruin my builds, describing about where to go in the nether for new players, I would love to just have a lectern that's just kind of part of the build or set aside where you could just kind of like look at it, realize, yes, I'm going to go this way. And because the lectern is universal, so if you go through and turn to page 3 and go to the iron farm and that light is lit up, when I arrive at the station, it's going to be already set to iron farm. All I have to do is move that book page to the right book page and then go in the direction that I want. No need to reset, right? Very, very cool.
And there's a bunch of different applications for it. I mean, I think Mumbo's already made a video about using a lectern as a shop kind of catalog almost. So you turn it to the page you want, it says, andesite blocks, and then you hit a button next to it and it orders you some items from the system. if you got like storage systems and minecarts and stuff linked up to it, you could easily just switch to like, okay, this is the item I want to recall from whatever system you're using, and it just kind of pops out in a shulker box or in a chest or something like that. There's so many different uses for it. My thought was maybe you could have it as like the floor selector in an elevator design.
Oh, cool.
And you just have a lectern standing there. You turn to like, I want to go to floor 3. You just turn to page 3. The elevator goes ping and sends you up. And
the most complicated elevator button ever.
Well, yeah, exactly. But you know, you could have stuff like that to select stuff and not have 15 buttons for all 15 floors. You know, so there's so many uses it could have in survival worlds, and I really can't wait to see what more of the Redstone community does with it, because it's going to open up a vast amount of stuff you can do. I'm sure.
I think previously the closest thing you can get for ease of use would be spinning an item in an item frame, which would give you 7 or 8 different signals. And in that video, I watched that Mumbo video, and that is mind-blowing because he uses this combination of yes or no, is there a book in the item frame? So he's got 6, I think, different item frames or 4 different item frames with books in them. And when you take that book out of the item frame, it tells the system to only look at like storage floor 4. Right.
Yeah.
And then within that floor, he's got 15 different items. So your bulk storage now is like, you could really categorize things like all of your stone. If there's 15 or less than 15 different items of stone things that you want to store in your system, you could have them all put away, and you could just recall, you know, a stack of everything by going to a book page and ordering stuff. I mean, is it faster than going around to you know, a big room full of chests? Maybe not. Is it cooler? Yes.
Absolutely, right? It is. Yeah.
But yeah, like that is just, I mean, he was making a store, but even just as a storage system, like that would be so cool. I'm really curious to see where it goes in the Redstone community for sure.
Definitely. So on to this week's discussion topic, which I brought to the table this week because I just raided a Woodland mansion for what's going to be tomorrow's episode of the Minecraft Survival Guide. And I was curious about your experience with Woodland mansions because they're not necessarily something every player comes across. Have you actually been out to one of them?
I have. I've kind of looked at the front of it and maybe stuck my nose in the main hall. MattCast on our server decided that it was going to be his mission to go and find one. And because he had found a map to one early on, and we had been waiting for 1.13 to drop because it was potentially really far away. And it's something like 6,000 or 7,000 blocks. You know, as the crow flies. And it took him a long time to find it. And him and Alistair had started the raid, and it didn't go very well. So he's been itching to get everybody together as an idea for a server event is to go and raid this Woodland mansion. And I have been really disinterested in it because I've seen it done on videos. It doesn't to me seem worth the walk or the fight for the stuff that you get. Like, it's not like this thing is made of blocks that you can't get.
Exactly. It's all dark oak wood and birch and carpets, and it's made out of very basic blocks, much the same way as you find the other generated structures like villager houses and things like that. They're all pretty straightforward. Yeah.
So not to sound, I don't want to sound like a negative Nancy on this, but like I really have no real desire to go and do that for those reasons. I can see maybe if one was nearby early game, but I feel like also they're never nearby. So in early game, like walking 6,000 blocks before you even get to the nether, like, nope, sorry. Not really in my to-do list. However, I have been watching a lot of, we'll say, end game content online, and I really enjoy the idea of moving mobs around, things like ghasts or evokers and some of the cool mobs that you can find in Woodland Mansion. So if we do decide to raid the Woodland Mansion, my caveat to the crew would be, okay, let's not kill everybody. Let's try to trap them so that if we wanted to move them later, because 6,000 blocks on the overworld is not that far in the nether. Like I could potentially, you know, with an iron farm and the tracks I already have, we could potentially move somebody to an area pretty easy. I like the idea of having an evoker turret, you know, in my base, or just kind of messing with them in that way. I think that could be kind of fun. Even if I can't see the evoker, just having I can't remember what their attack is called. The thing where the chain comes out of the ground and the spikes.
Yeah, they're called fangs. They're kind of more like kind of alligator mouths that come out.
Yeah. So like that kind of stuff is really cool. And if you can't see the evoker, but you can see that come out of the ground, that would be kind of a cool environment, kind of immersion thing.
Yeah, definitely.
to add to the thing. I have no desire to fight Vexes. That doesn't seem like a fun idea at all.
Yeah, not so much.
But yeah, outside of that, I haven't had any real interest in it because to me, the other early game experience of finding a nether fortress is cooler and more fun and more rewarding than a woodland mansion, especially because nether fortresses are usually easier to find.
Yeah, and they're also kind of required for gameplay progression as well, because if you want to get to the end and fight the dragon, you need blaze powder for the Eyes of Ender.
Right.
And that's something you can only get in a nether fortress. Blazes don't spawn anywhere else. Whereas there isn't really much in the way of progression for like an incentive to raid a woodland mansion, which is probably a good thing given how far away they typically spawn from your Java Edition world spawn point. I've seen screenshots, I think, from Bedrock, unless maybe there's a Java seed or two that does this, where people have spawned and there have been like 3 woodland mansions really close by because they always seem to spawn in those dark oak forests. So some of our listeners who play on other platforms may be much more familiar with woodland mansions than you, but yeah, it's good to know that you at least know what I'm going to be talking about, because I've raided my share of them. I've raided probably 4 or 5 of them in total. I've been to them on I think the first update they came in was, I think, 1.10 or sometime around then. I may be misremembering that. It might even be 1.9. But yeah, around that time when, a few other goals were added in for world exploration, like end cities and stuff like that. Woodland mansions came along around the same time, and they became much less exciting than going to an end city because, at least as far as I was concerned, they didn't really have all that much to do in them. Like you said, there's not much in the way of loot. Previously, I'd only experienced a few of the rooms that can spawn in there, and one is this room that's full of double chests that never have anything in. It's just a storage room. And to the average player, if you want to take over the woodland mansion, you go, oh great, like I've got built-in storage, I don't have to craft any more chests. But considering that the time you get to explore to a woodland mansion, you've already created a storage system, at least, a rudimentary one at your base. Yeah. It doesn't exactly seem all that inviting. However, this time I found 5 or 6 rooms that I'd never even seen before. And there was actual loot in them for a start. There are occasional loot chests dotted around. You just have to get lucky which rooms generate inside these mansions. And so I found, amusingly enough, 2 diamond hoes in the loot chests. Wow. So kind of further distancing illagers from the player base and like their villager cousins. They are the type of people who would use their diamonds to make hoes, which is always a black mark as far as the Minecraft community is concerned. Even when I made a diamond hoe to try and get that advancement for using up a diamond hoe, and I diamond hoed my wheat field in my survival guide, I got so many comments from people saying, like, why would you waste your diamonds on a hoe? And I'm like, guys, I've got like 2 stacks and change of diamonds at this point.
Yeah, that's how I have a diamond hoe. All the power to us, man.
Yeah, exactly. Diamond Hoe crowd for the win.
Yeah.
But I also found like golden apples and stuff in there, so there was a little bit of useful loot, which is probably the first time I've actually found useful loot inside one of those mansions. Not only that, but I looked at the Minecraft wiki page for them, and there are 2 rooms that can generate in there that contain blocks of diamond. There is one where the block of diamond is covered in obsidian in the middle of the room, and there's another one where it generates like a tank of lava. There's like a 3x3x3 cube of lava, but the block in the center is a block of diamond. So if you remove all of the lava blocks from inside there, you get to take away a block of diamond. So there is actually stuff like that. It just doesn't have a chance to... It doesn't always spawn in a woodland mansion. So I've never encountered either of those rooms before, which seems to me a bit of a mistake in terms of, like, you think you would give stuff like that priority to reward players for going out that far and braving stepping into the woodland mansion because it's full of stuff that's trying to kill you.
Yeah, and not easy mobs from what I can tell. I mean, you've got...
Absolutely.
The Vindicator, the Evoker, and the Illusioner. Well, no, the Illusioner's not in there. I'm reading the wiki page.
Yes, exactly.
And then coming in 1.14, we've got the Pillager and the Illager Beast as well.
Yes, I wanted to talk about the Illagers in more detail, and Illusioners specifically, because they aren't even implemented into the game. They've been created along with the other Illagers, and either they were deemed too hard, or for whatever reason they just thought, no, it's not the right time to implement these. They can only be spawned in the game using commands. You have to use the /summon command. It doesn't even have a spawn egg in the creative inventory. And reading up on the Wikipedia page for it, they sound like a nightmare. Like, to give you a quick excerpt from the Wikipedia page, they cast blindness on you if the regional difficulty is greater than 2, which means, if you've been in the chunks for long enough, if you've fought enough mobs, if you've been there for a couple of days and nights, then it like raises this kind of local difficulty level, and if it gets above 2, they will cast blindness on you, so you won't be able to see. If you've already got night vision enabled for any reason, then the blindness effect basically blacks out your entire screen and you can't see anything, which is very, very scary. Then they summon duplicates and cast invisibility on themselves. So there are 4 identical clones of this illusioner walking around. You can't do any damage to them, they can't do any damage to you, but when the illusioner attacks you, which it does with a bow, again, it's a ranged mob, then they all look like they're firing at you as well. So suddenly you've got 4 things trying to fire at you, and an arrow coming from somewhere, but the illusioner is invisible, so you don't know where it is. It's absurd. Like, I can understand why they haven't added these in, because they sound like an absolute nightmare to fight.
It also has a whopping experience drop of 5.
Yeah, exactly. Like, it's really, and I think maybe they would, raise that up a little bit. But it's got a decent amount of health as well. I think it's quite similar to the Vindicators and the Evokers.
Evokers at 24, and health points for the Illusioner is 32.
Exactly. Yeah. So they're like the boss of the Woodland Mansion that just doesn't exist because it hasn't been implemented into the game. And these are only in Java Edition as well. You can't spawn them at all in Bedrock Edition. And once again, you have to spawn them using commands in Java. So I feel like they are there just as like a final boss to people's adventure maps if they don't feel like coding a more kind of interesting experience for themselves. As for the other 2, the Vindicators are the axe murdery ones, and the fun Easter egg with them, which I think a lot of people already know about, is the fact that you can name tag them Jonny, Johnnny, which is not how I spell my name, so I'm fine being distanced from these guys. As a reference to Jack Nicholson's character in The Shining, who wasn't actually called Johnny, but the famous "Here's Johnny" line where he's attacking his wife with the axe and breaking through the door. They attack anything if you name tag them Johnny, except for other illagers and ghasts, presumably because they can't reach them. But they will go after passive mobs, hostile mobs of any other kinds. And you can use this in fun, interesting ways. I've seen people use it for just for fun, to have them like run around killing hostile mobs for you. I've seen people use it for passive animal farming. So you can just have a system that kind of feeds cows slowly into a room so you don't run out of your breeding stock of cows, but the Vindicator will just kill them one by one, and that's a way of farming beef without having to have player interaction for it. So, obviously getting the Vindicator back to whatever base you happen to have set up is a difficult task to begin with, but it's kind of fun to include stuff like that in the game, and allows a little bit more opportunity for automation than I think people give it credit for. People don't tend to use this all that much because they've got other systems for it. Maybe they've got a looting sword and they prefer to get their meat that way, but it's possible to do that, and it's something I plan to cover later on, much later on in the Minecraft Survival Guide, just because it's something I've never done in survival, and I imagine you probably haven't either if you've not really had that much interest in a Woodland Mansion. But
no, I've moved a lot of villagers around, but I've not moved a lot of hostile mobs around. Maybe a skeleton here or there, but nothing.
It's a little bit more of a complicated process to move hostile mobs because of the damage factor. But
I've watched enough people do it. Like, really smart thing is to put a path of glass above your track so that the head of the mob is always in a transparent block, which does not suffocate them, but also blocks their line of sight so that they can't see you.
So they're not going to attack you. And that's, definitely a smart move, I think.
Yeah, and I've seen some really cool stuff where people have like a pane of glass, which just shows up as a single spike that you can't see because it disappears inside the model of the mob. And they have that on a piston. And if you release the piston, then it raises the glass pane, and then it allows the bad thing to see you and shoot you or do whatever. I like the idea of having more mobs in Minecraft. I'm curious to see how all of this is going to change when you've got evokers and what are the other ones?
Vindicators.
Vindicators that are showing up in the raids for villages. Because then that becomes as close as your closest village, as opposed to wherever your Woodland Mansion happens to be. So you could not have to transport, a evoker or any of the other mobs thousands and thousands of blocks. It might only be 100 blocks. It could be less than that in the Nether, depending on how close your village is. And so that I find really interesting in terms of, I'm more interested, I think, in the mobs than I am in the actual Woodland Mansion.
Exactly. I feel like illagers are a little bit overlooked, and functionality like this is kind of what makes them really interesting to me and desirable in the first place. It does kind of make it a shame that then you don't have the need to go out and explore and find the Woodland Mansion in the first place, but I imagine, because currently the illagers that spawn in a woodland mansion do not despawn and they don't respawn in there either. So basically, once you've generated a mansion, that is it. The population is already fixed, and you're the only one who can change that. You kill them, they are gone forever. You save them and take them elsewhere. There aren't nobody else is going to spawn there. No more pillagers, or illagers rather, will actually end up spawning in there. So the pillager raids become an opportunity perhaps to have renewable vindicators and evokers, and I don't know if the same functionality is going to apply to those. I would assume not. I imagine they despawn if you get far enough away, or they're not going to continue spawning like that unless you activate another raid. But it's going to be interesting to see a little bit more of them. One other thing I wanted to touch on quickly, there's a lesser known Easter egg with evokers that I actually saw, again, Cubfan being the innovator that he is, using in a recent Hermitcraft video, where if evokers encounter a blue sheep, specifically a blue sheep, they cast a spell and they dye the sheep red. And it's the only mob that will ever interact with something to dye it a different color. And it's a direct reference to priests, which are a unit in Age of Empires, the old kind of Age of Empires like real-time strategy games, and they can convert enemy units to your side by effectively praying and kind of saying, hey, come over to our side. And so that's the only thing they do that's just completely off the wall. Like, normally they will just attack you. They've got the fangs that come out of the floor. They summon the Vexes. Also, if you bring them a blue sheep, they'll turn it red. I just found that kind of adorable in a way. It just kind of gives them this weird character that you don't otherwise have with other stuff.
Yeah, I wish there was more stuff like that in the game. I wish that you could do certain things with certain sheep, dyeing it a certain color. Like similar to if you rename, I think it's any mob Dinnerbone, it flips upside down. Is that the right?
Yeah, just little Easter egg stuff like that. And I kind of, it's not quite on the same level as mob sorting stuff where creepers are afraid of cats and, skeletons are afraid of wolves and that kind of thing. It's more just this is just silly. It's just there for a bit of fun.
Yeah, like turning a sheep red makes it aggressive. Turns it into a hostile mob, where it tries to headbutt you to death. I don't know, just stuff like the cartoon brain in me just kind of goes crazy with stories like that. So, I'm not certainly going to go out and seek out a Woodland Mansion. I am more interested, I think, in what 1.14 changes are coming to those that we don't know about. Because I just feel like there's an awful strong tie between outposts, Woodland Mansions, because they look the same, and the raids. And I'm just wondering if there's stuff that's happening there in the background that are actually going to be changing. Even if it's just the frequency of Woodland Mansions, maybe they just need a dark oak forest of a certain size and they spawn, right? Maybe it's not as rare as they used to be.
Yeah, I kind of hope that is the case, because like I said, I feel like this whole aspect of the game has been a little bit overlooked. And for people who think that Minecraft doesn't present a huge challenge right now, I feel like raids and stuff are going to present a little bit of that as well. But try raiding a woodland mansion one of these days, because I went in there with full protection diamond armor and I nearly got my butt handed to me. I was wearing a Lytra so I didn't have the full chest plate on and everything, but Vexes hit really hard. Vindicator's the same. You get stuck in a corner in one of those things, you're toast. So I think it's worth a go. Give your local woodland mansion a call and see if they've got any vacancies. Yeah,
chest plate makes a big difference, I've noticed.
It really does.
In videos that I've watched, especially with the Vexes. And I think that's the other thing that I find I don't want to say tedious, but something unappealing about this kind of stuff is that I find the tiny Vex thing, that's the sort of PvE that I don't enjoy. It's a small, fast moving thing that hits like a truck. It's I don't know.
You need Twitch reflexes to get to it.
Yeah. It's so. I realize that they've been part of the game for a while, but to me, it just feels distant from the kind of gameplay you normally get in Minecraft, right?
Mm-hmm.
Where I think the fastest moving thing that I still have trouble contending with is the little baby zombies. I don't necessarily, I would say it's only a 50-50 chance of me killing a baby zombie without getting hit myself. I always win, but I feel like I don't often get a clean getaway. I always take at least one poke. Right. Same with spiders. I can't get the timing on their attack right. They're harmless really at the end game, but I never seem to be able to kill a spider without it at least touching me once.
They're always just jumping over the sword swing or something like that.
Yeah, something like that. I'm not. Or it's also a server. It could be lag. I don't know.
Yeah, and Vexes are the worst for that as well, because they'll fly through blocks. That's the thing I had to contend with the most, was I was shooting at them, but then the arrow would just hit the wall they'd just gone through, and I was like, no.
Yeah.
was a little bit difficult to handle, but yeah, I still had a lot of fun raiding the mansion. I haven't done that for a while, and you know, it's a fun experience. It's also fun to get Totems of Undying, which again is something I will never really use, and I feel like don't really have a lot of point. They're another thing that I think could maybe be revised a little bit more about the game, but that's probably another story for another time. For now, I think, like your friendly neighborhood vindicator, I'm going to bring the axe down on this episode of The Spawn Chunks. You can find out more information about the show and links to some of the things we talked about today on thespawnchunks.com. The music for the show was composed by me, and The Spawn Chunks is proud to be a listener-supported podcast. We get all of our support from our Patreon community, and if you get some value out of the show, consider putting some value back in by joining them. You can visit patreon.com/thespawnchunks to join our community, and pledging at any level will get you an invite to our patrons-only Discord chat, where we have a lot of really great discussions going on basically every single day. It'll get us closer to our next Patreon goals, and we're currently at 47 patrons, which is up for last week. Thank you guys so much again for your support. It always means a lot.
Johnny, I'm wondering if we are going to be able to hit 50 patrons before the end of January.
Make it happen, folks.
I'm feeling positive about it. I think that's a great milestone to hit for the end of the month, and I'd love to see it. And you won't regret it. People are having a ton of fun in the Discord, and I really, again, have to tip my hat to the level of discourse in there. It's been really, really positive and fun, and I really enjoy peeking in. It's almost getting hard to keep up with, which is great to see. I'm not complaining at all. One of the best ways that you can actually support the show is free. Just tell friends about it. Spread the show on social media. It is at @thespawnchunks on Twitter and Instagram. But personal recommendations are by far the best, as we saw last week. Just recommending the show to a server mate or a friend that plays Minecraft goes a long way. And in person, you can actually poke people in the arm. Not too hard, maybe not, Vindicator hard, but
don't even bruise.
No, but just the gentle. I mean, if it's your younger brother or sister, like poke them. Just be like, look, you should listen to this. Or older. I don't know. I don't want to be ageist. You can contact the show at thespawnchunks@gmail.com. You can subscribe on iTunes, Android, Stitcher, and Spotify. The RSS link is on thespawnchunks.com, and the patron-only RSS feed is on the Patreon page, and that is the only place that you can listen to the render distance, the extended version of the podcast.
My name is PixelRiffs, and you can find most of what I do at youtube.com/PixelRiffs, where I attempt to make sense of this crazy and wonderful game in a series called the Minecraft Survival Guide. I'm also the voice for the unofficial Hermitcraft recap, which you can find through a quick YouTube search, and I stream 3 days a week on Twitch, where this week I finished up Final Fantasy IX, started Final Fantasy X, having a lot of fun playing that series. Aside from that, I'm at PixelRiffs on both Twitter and Instagram. Joel, where can people find you online?
Everything that I am doing online, including my illustration and design portfolio, is at joelduggan.com. I am currently available for hire, so if you'd like to do some artwork with me, then let me know. You can listen to other podcasts I do. One is called The Citadel Cafe, where I talk about sci-fi and geeky entertainment. My friend Lou and I talked about Into the Spider-Verse and Titans, the new Netflix Teen Titans show this past week. Comics Coast to Coast, where I interview comic creators, illustrators, and animators with my friends Brian and Matt. And everything on social media is just my name. It's all Joel Duggan. I'm going to point you towards Twitch, where I'm having a lot of fun playing Minecraft and doing some art streams. So check that out at twitch.tv/Joel Duggan.
Thanks for visiting the Spawn Chunks. The world outside is infinite. Compost all the things!